What's up, guys? I've got a really interesting Smartsheet problem that was posted on the Smartsheet community. It's actually a problem that I've kind of wrestled with quite a bit in my project adventure using Smartsheet. It was posted by Steve. So shout out to you, Steve. I appreciate you posting that to the community. And what we're going to do today is just really kind of break down how to integrate two different project schedules. Let's say project manager one, project manager two, how do we bring those into a singular schedule, even if there's no predecessor relationships? And so this really scales all the way out to program management, maybe even portfolio management, and how do we get all of those schedules to sort of talk to each other in one overall master schedule. So I hope you guys find this content really helpful. And Steve, I really hope this solves your problem, man. Good luck smart sheeting, and we'll jump over to it. All right, let's get to it. I'm working on a large project with 8 different work streams. I built a project schedule for 7 of the work streams. This schedule has all predecessor information. There are 2 different Smartsheet schedules that were created by another PM for the 8th work stream. These 2 Smartsheet schedules do not have predecessor information. I'm trying to determine if there is a best practice or acceptable way to include information from the 2 schedules that do not have predecessors into the main schedule that does. I tried just entering milestones from the 2 different schedules into the main schedule, but without the predecessor information, the critical path calculation doesn't work. Any tips or advice would be greatly appreciated. Steve. All right, Steve. So, one of the things that it sounds like you got going on is you've got 2 project managers, 8 different work streams. You built a project schedule for 7 of the work streams. This schedule has all the predecessor information. There's 2 different Smartsheet schedules created by another PM for the 8th work stream. These 2 Smartsheet schedules do not have predecessor information. I am trying to determine if there's a best practice or acceptable way to include information from the 2 schedules that do not have predecessors into the main schedule that does. I tried just entering milestones from the 2 different schedules into the main schedule. All right, gotcha. So basically, it sounds like you've got 2 project managers, you as one, another project manager who's got 2 schedules for one work stream. You're trying to build those work streams into your schedule. The best way to do this is with cell linking. Um, One of the reasons is you'll see that there's 2 different ways to bring in data, two relatively 2 different ways to bring in data into a smart sheet. One of those is through cross sheet references. The other is through cell linking. The problem with cross sheet references and dates, as you're talking about here with predecessors, dependencies, etc., is that the date columns, especially in the anything that has dependencies related to it, really don't play nicely with formulas. Not to say that some of them don't work, but I'd say most generally speaking, it isn't the best way to do it. The best way is through cell linking. So you can imagine if you have 2 different schedules, or 3 in this case, one main schedule, 2 secondary schedules. What we want to do is to take the parent row of both of the secondary schedules and then bring that in to the primary schedule. So I'm going to jump over to Smartsheet and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so we have our first schedule here. I have it called Steve 2. Let's rename this to the main schedule to avoid confusion. Then we're going to add the second. I'm going to create it under a Gantt. And then we'll rename this to secondary schedule 1. And then we'll add another secondary schedule 2. All right, so now we've got a main schedule and 2 secondary schedules. And so what it sounds like is you want to bring the the information from the secondary schedule 1 and secondary schedule 2 over to the main schedule. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to clear out some of this test data or just actually reformat it, and we'll just say project name. So always the top the way that I structure these schedules is always at the very top. I have um, the project name or the overall project or the work stream, you can even call it. And you can have all your different tasks in here, tuck those under so that everything inside of this schedule rolls up to the project name. If you had two, let's say you had, we could even do it something like this where it's like work stream one, and then just copy these rows. I'll do it through row actions here. We'll hit copy and then just paste those work streams there. So then we have work stream two. So you can have two different work streams. It really depends on how you want to set it up. I really like to use some conditional formatting to get it kind of populating right with maybe something like an element type column that says like header, um, you know, I if you're using earned value management, which I use frequently, you'd use like phase, control account, work package, task, subtask, header, subheader, etc. And some of those really just help kind of visualize the breakdown in the parent-child relationship, which we're not going to get into today. But really what I just want to show is how we can get that information over into the parent work stream. Now, just to save a little bit of time, I am going to copy these over to secondary schedule 2, just so that we have that information over there. There's no attachments or comments, so we're not going to need that. Cool. Now we've got this information. I'm going to also delete these top rows. So we have, I'll just call this work stream 3, work stream 4. Now, Steve owns the main schedule, and then we have the two other schedules based on the way that I'm reading it. Now, what we want to do is we'll just say, actually, let's populate some sample data over here, and I'll just call it Steve's work stream over here. So we'll bring some of these over just to kind of simulate what Steve's got going on there. All right, clear these out, and then I'll just use a find and replace to replicate those. Hit copy, paste. We'll move those over, separate work streams. Oh, we don't want to keep that in there. Separate work stream there. I'll show you some tricks I use to kind of automate some of this. So I'm just tucking these all so that the parent-child, so we've got work stream 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we will just add a 7th in here as well. And so by no means do I actually believe that I'm going to hit the mark on getting exactly what's in there. I'm sure what Steve has in there is quite more complex than what I've got so far. But then I'm just going to click and drag, and as you can see, it's going to populate 1 through 7, the 8th being separated between two schedules, I think, based on the way I'm reading it. Control F, then I'm just going to hit work stream. And this is a neat way to replace stuff when you're kind of automating it. And then instead of calling it work stream, we'll call it Steve's work stream. So that way we can take that whole string and kind of replace it. Now, one thing that you'll see is we'll just call this PM2 work stream 8. So that'll work. And then we'll call it schedule, well, I'll call it secondary schedule 1. Secondary schedule 2. And we're just going to kind of tuck those in there. Now, there are some rules that we need to be aware of whenever we're doing cell linking within dependencies. So here's what I mean when I talk about dependencies. I'm going to click on the parent or the primary column and go into my project settings. Whenever you create a Gantt, what's really nice that Smartsheet's done is given you those dependencies already set up in sort of this template for the Gantt chart. That's really all a Gantt is a template already created. And what you'll see is there's a start date, a finish date, percent complete. Sometimes those are not included, especially with a Gantt. I don't think it's included, but you can go ahead and add a percent complete column. That's no problem. But the real critical aspect here is dependencies enabled. If you create your own sheet, those dependencies won't be enabled, which I'm sure Steve knows by this point. And this is also where you can go in, set all of your working days, Monday through Sunday, length of your days, etc. It kind of gets a little bit complex as you move through some of that stuff. But just to hit the nail on the head for Steve here, what we're going to do is do an inbound cell link. Now, here's what's really, really important. You cannot inbound cell link a finish date. So going back into the project settings, predecessors cannot be cell linked. Also, end dates cannot be cell linked. So you can't do anything with the end date or the predecessors. It messes up the whole dependency calculation that Smartsheet's doing. And when you put some thought into it, it actually makes sense of why that would be the case. So what we'll do is we will link from a cell in another sheet, and we will bring in Smartsheet Community Secondary Schedule 1. Give it a second to load. There we go. And then we'll just bring in the start date here. I'll do the same thing, but I'll go to the other schedule. Secondary Schedule 2, bring in the start date, hit create link. Next thing I'm going to do, hopefully, yep, there our dates go. Next thing I am going to do is I will cell link in here, Secondary Schedule 1. Let's grab his duration there. And basically all we're trying to do is trick Smartsheet into this master schedule to grab the durations from the secondary schedule. Be careful. Make sure you're grabbing it from the right sheet here. It seems like I was maybe a little sloppy there. You can double check. So secondary schedule 1, just by hovering over the cell linking. Secondary schedule 2, secondary schedule 2. So that's all good. Secondary schedule 1. And so then with a quick save and then refresh, you'll be able to see that those durations have populated. Sometimes they take a little bit, so give it a second to refresh there. There we go. Now, one of the questions might be, hey, Ward, how do I make sure I integrate this into the predecessor relationships? So let me show you how to get that done. So let's say the predecessors for all of these tasks. Let's just call these, let's say that's 2, and then I'll pre-populate those like that. Let's say this is 10. So for those who may not know what predecessors are and how to get those started, on the left-hand side, you're going to see the row numbers here. Not to be confused with row IDs. These are the row numbers, just based on, it's like basically counting all the rows that are inside of the sheet. And so all you're going to do is program the predecessor relationship with the actual row number that you want. So as you can see, I have gone in and selected 12. We're just doing finish to start. This links to task 1. As you can tell, I'm not going to do any lead lag. I'm sure Steve kind of has a grip on all of that if he built 7 work streams. Good job, Steve. And then we will go into 20 and then 22 and populate those and etc. You'll see that we keep moving through these and getting our predecessor relationships built into these work streams. Yeah, so you go to 30 and if you click and drag, you'll get these weird references. What's happening here is that you've got that parent row and it's trying to do those, and you create all sorts of errors, so you actually have to skip one in this case. In other cases, you might have to skip many, depending on how many parent rows you've actually included there. So we'll go 40, 42, bring those down. Now, I'm going to throw a little wrench in it all here in just a second, and we will include PM's work stream. So then we're going to go to 50, 52, populate all of these. Then we will go to 60, 62, And actually, let's get rid of those because that is going to mess with our um, parent-child relationship. As you can see, let's show you kind of what would happen if I were to click 60. See how it's going to change that start date and it immediately removes that cell linking? Definitely don't do that. My recommendation, Steve, is that you actually go in here once we've created those and you lock this. That way nobody can go in and mess with it because that is going to bring in the other PM's information. Nobody really needs to be in there. It's a placeholder. It's more of an integration piece, a bridge, so to speak, than it is something that you'd want to set. So unless you had admin privileges, no editors will be able to go in and mess with this. But what we can do then is include this into the work stream. So you can hit 60. Let's say this is just 60 there. Or let's say we want to include the relationships um, from the PM2. There you go. So you can see if we included, let's say, secondary schedule 2, the predecessor relationship to row 63 would go into task 1, and then we'll just put in 65, roll this down, and that's how you kind of build that into the schedule. So again, all we've done is brought in the duration and the start date. The finish date is based on start date plus duration, all the project settings. Here's what I'm going to say that's really, really important regarding these two factors is if you don't have the project settings synchronized between the primary schedule, master schedule, and the secondary schedules, you're going to get different end dates. So that's something to be aware of. Make sure you talk to the other project manager that you have, your days are the same length and you have all the same vacation days. I would highly recommend that. And for obvious reasons, two different PMs are going to want their own sheets. So totally nothing wrong with doing this. Just make sure you're able to communicate about those things. That way, as he's actually changing it. So let's go into um, the secondary schedule number 1. And as he's actually changing it, let's say this duration is 100. Okay, so that should change to 106. As we go into the main schedule, you'll start to see that updates. So we'll give it a second. We'll hit refresh. There we go. We've got 106 and that finish date reflected. Now, if we want to say the total project or all of the work streams, we can just say project name. And this will be the ultimate parent of all of these. We can break these down underneath that parent row. And then what you'll see is the maximum start and the maximum finish. And because there's that parent-child relationship where all of the work streams now are tucked under a single row, you can see how they're all integrated into one master schedule. I do this all the time from a program management perspective where we have, say, 100 projects, but we're trying to populate that information into a single program management pipeline. This is a really common practice. It's actually better done with Smartsheet Control Center. There's some different tricks to use in Smartsheet Control Center, but that'll be a full hour video if I try to do that. So thanks for joining me. Good luck, Steve. And if you have any questions, you can contact me using the information below on the Smartsheet community. Have a great day.